What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. Differentiation was a concept that was introduced into psychiatry and psychology by Dr. Murray Bowen, a psychiatrist. And Bowen took a very, very different approach to understanding our human dilemma. He looked at it more from a perspective of evolution than from the psychodynamic ideas that were really dominant in the field in the 50s, which were psychoanalysis. And what Bowen did is he said, I think that we are influenced by forces that influence every living species on our planet. And so he kind of looked at what were those life forces, and he identified two powerful instinctive life forces. And that is the desire to be your own person for your individuality. The desire for separateness is another way to say it. And he identified the desire to be connected to be together, to be a part of, to join, to connect, to be in relationship to. And he saw our development is shaped by how our family dealt with those two, which in some families are very conflicting forces. They don't have to be, because if your differentiation is high, you can be yourself and you can still cooperate. So we're going to continue on with this discussion, because one way of looking at emotional sobriety is by putting on this lens of differentiation. Because when we put that lens on, we see that emotional maturity is really transcending our need for what we call environmental support. It's transcending our emotional dependence and our dependence on other people to make us okay. So we can quickly start to think of differentiation along this continuum of being undifferentiated on one end to being differentiated on the other end. When we're undifferentiated, there is not a clear sense of yourself. In fact, yourself at the real low ends of differentiation is completely determined by other people and how they feel about you. You are so focused on love and being loved and unable to be in a relationship with loving because your anxiety is through the roof. So at low ends of the differentiation scale, anxiety is chronic. It's experienced all the time because you have so many rules and expectations about how things have to be for you to be okay. I like how Roger introduced that as an only if things were this way, then I could feel fine. I've talked about it as I'm okay if mentality. It's the same idea, is that our state of well-being is dependent on all of these conditions that we impose on life itself, we impose on relationships, and we impose on ourselves. So the more differentiated a person is on that scale that I was talking about, the more a person can be who they are in a close relationship without being overly influenced by what the other person is doing. Now, remember, and I've really gone to great lengths to say that doesn't mean I don't take what the other person wants into consideration. It's that I weigh that with my own desire. And I don't automatically give myself up to please them, or I don't automatically dismiss what they want to hold on to myself. That I can consider the other person's needs, but I don't compromise mine to meet theirs. And I don't alienate them from me to be in relationship if I don't meet their needs. We were talking, there's an emotional sobriety study group that I'm sure that information will get posted in the chat at some time tonight, but we were talking about is it's really challenging to have conflict with someone and not alienate that person in the conflict. If the more differentiated I am, the more I'm able to tolerate that tension that comes from conflict and not alienate the person I'm having that conflict with. I'm able to stay connected through the conflict and just add more of myself. The more differentiated a person is, the more a person can enhance their own welfare without impinging on the welfare of others. So I just want to stay with that for a minute, which means I can go ahead and take care of myself without subtracting from you. The more differentiated I can take care of myself, and it's not related to or interdependent on what you're doing. So I don't have to dismiss you. I don't have to control you. I don't have to dominate you. I don't have to please you to take care of myself or rebel against you. Because that's one way, if you're feeling controlled by other people, one way of dealing with that is to rebel against that person and not do what they want you to do. That's called a pseudo self. That's trying to take care of yourself in a way that's really not taking care of yourself. It looks like you're holding on to yourself, but you're not. You're just being rebellious. So if I'm married to Kathy and I'm undifferentiated, she says, "Will you take the garbage out?" Either I will go underground and be passive aggressive and say, "Yes, honey," and not do it. And so we wake up in the morning. She says, Didn't you take the garbage out? You agreed to. And then I play this game like I'm stupid. Oh, I forgot. When really I didn't want to do it because I'm really saying, quit trying to control me. You're not my goddamn mother. I know that the trash needs to be taken out. But you see, if I was differentiated, I wouldn't be reacting to her that way. And I wouldn't have to rebel against her. Or if I didn't go underground, I would rebel the other way. I'd say, God, can't you just stay on your side of the street? I know that the garbage needs to be taken out. God damn it. Quit treating me like a little boy. Well, if I'm getting mad at her for treating me like a mother, I'm acting like a little boy. I mean, that's the problem with that. If she just said to me, "Hey, take the trash out," I guess you must be anxious about me getting the trash out tonight. It's important to you. I can hear that. I do plan to take it out, and I'll do that. I can cooperate without losing myself. You see, that's at the higher level of differentiation. But we got to work through this because none of us are well differentiated. Trust me, we just aren't. I wanted to read to you an excerpt from this book called Family Evaluation from Bowen and Kerr. So he's describing what happens in a well-differentiated family when we're growing up, right? He goes, in a well-differentiated family, emotionality and subjectivity are not strong influences on the relationship between the parents or on a relationship between the parents and the children. The low intensity of emotionality or togetherness pressure permits a child to grow to think, feel, and act for himself. You see, when a family's differentiation is low, there's all this pressure for the child to behave a certain way so that the parents feel okay. And when that happens, the child is caught in this dilemma. I want to be myself, but I also want to please my parents. And I'm very dependent on my parents. So pleasing my parents becomes a very important thing. And so what happens in a family like that, the parents require obedience at the expense of the child's individuality. So if a child can grow to think and feel and act for himself, then the child can view parents, siblings, and others not just as people with roles in his life, but as distinct and separate individuals. You see, the more differentiated I am, the more you become who you are to me. You're not a projection of what I need you to be. I can experience you as you are. The more undifferentiated I am, the more I require you to be the way I think you're supposed to be, so I feel okay. So now you're not an individual in my life. You're now an object that I'm trying to manipulate to be what I think I need you to be for me to be okay. It causes a hell of a lot of problems. Because the truth is that most of us start off a relationship with that very dynamic going on, that we project all of these unmet needs into this person we're going to get together with, and then we get mad at them when they don't meet our unmet needs and resolve all these dilemmas that we brought into the relationship. Now, of course, remember, we're pretty young when we do this stuff. So the child's self-image is not formed in reaction to the anxieties and emotional neediness of others. In a well-differentiated family, listen to this, the child's self, hold on, I lost my place here. The child's self-image is not formed in reaction to the anxieties and emotional neediness of others, nor do others define the child through their own emotionally distorted perceptions. Dr. Kempler used to say, a healthy family is not defined or lives up to some ideal of what a healthy family is, but rather is shaped by who or the reality of who each individual is in the family. Can you hear that? That's what a well-differentiated family is. By the way, there's not many of these. So don't think that, oh shit, I wish I had one of those. It's very rare. It's like winning the lottery. Trust me. It doesn't happen frequently. The child's self is not incorporated automatically from others through emotional pressure to gain acceptance and approval. In contrast, beliefs, values, and convictions are arrived at thoughtfully and consistent with one another. The child grows to be a part of the family, yet separate from it. The child grows to be a part of the family, yet separate from it. In a poorly differentiated family, emotionality and subjectivity have a strong influence on family relationships. Now, it's the emotions that are running the show. You follow me? And the just subjectivity. The high intensity of emotionality or togetherness pressure does not permit a child to grow, to think, feel, and act for himself. The child now needs to be what the parents think the child must be in order to be okay, for them to be okay. The child functions in reaction to others. God, please hear that. We function in reaction to others. We don't function autonomously, but our self is determined by what's going on with the other people. A good example is a rebellious adolescent. His rebellion reflects the lack of differentiation that exists between him and his parents. The rebel is a highly reactive person whose self is poorly developed. He operates in opposition to his parents and others. They, in turn, are sufficiently unsure of themselves and that they react automatically to his acting out behavior. Most of his values and beliefs are formed in opposition to the beliefs of others, based more on emotional reactiveness than thinking. The beliefs are usually inconsistent. More of the parent's emotional immaturities influence the relationship with the child than with his siblings. The acting out child, in turn, responds in a more immature manner to the parents than do the other children. It is a reinforcing system of interaction that transcends blame, although mutual blaming is common because they're undifferentiated. When the child leaves home, he replicates some version of the family relationship pattern with others. He plays his part in fostering the replication, and others play theirs. Having achieved little emotional separateness from his family, he achieves little in other relationships. So, our challenge is, as we start to move along this path of differentiation, is to become aware of how these forces have shaped our life. You see, in the Emotional Sobriety study group that we had beforehand, I had a discussion of freedom, and I'll be bringing that discussion to this meeting at some point. But what's relevant now in it is that no freedom can be achieved until we own how determined our behavior is by these forces that have been operating in our life. When we look at our life through the lens of differentiation, we want to start looking at to what degree was our individuality accepted, encouraged, honored, respected as we were growing up? Or were we pressured to give ourselves up and conform to the unenforceable rules that were very, omnipresent in our family? So this is the final thing I'll say about this, and I'll open this up for Roger and Thom to come in and say a few things, is the more undifferentiated we are, the more unenforceable rules there will be. The more undifferentiated our parents were, the more unenforceable rules they're going to have for how we're supposed to behave. That's not the same as saying that a laissez-faire parent that has no rules is differentiated. Nope. It's that the relationship is tuned into the other person, and the parenting is done in relationship to who each person is, not according to some ideal. Okay, enough said. I got you. Hopefully that's a lot, but we're going to be, like I said, I'm going to be giving you this. We're going to do bite-sized chunks each week. And as we grow our understanding of this, it's going to make more and more sense. I mean, look at Thom. He looks more mature already, doesn't he? My God, he's changing right before our very eyes.
Yes, it's happening now.
Right this
It's
minute.
happening right now. Finally. It's just now starting, actually. It's yeah. Hey, Roger.
Hey, Thom. Good evening, man. Good evening. Actually, I'd like to jump in at this point, Thom, if that's okay with you. Because
I think so.
Alan, where you finished is what has been percolating in my mind the whole time you've been talking about. The first thing, one of the first steps in this process is becoming aware, is paying attention to and becoming aware of, seeking to understand. My process with differentiation, rather than, and I know this is a theme I often go to, but rather than turning it into a bunch of shoulds, to me, the first step in this process is, as we've talked about before, is just showing curiosity for myself about it, paying attention to with different people in my life, in different circumstances in my life, at different points in my life, but especially in the present. How able do I feel to express myself? How hesitant do I feel to express myself? How able am I to talk about what I want or what I don't want? Those 4 sentences are sentences that Alan encourages clients to use a lot as part of the path toward increased differentiation. I like, I don't like, I want, I don't want. And within myself, I notice all kinds of situations where I'm hesitant to express that because I want to defer to the other person. I want to show consideration for them, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing if there's room for me to express what I want. So that's the first thing I wanted to share is we learn a lot, not by trying to change this from the get-go and not by getting caught up with all kinds of ideas about how to change it, but just by starting to pay attention to and take ownership of what I do get in touch with, rather than laying a bunch of shoulds on myself. That to me is a reality-based, down-to-earth, grounded kind of approach to understanding differentiation. The other part of the I like, I don't like, I want, I don't want is, am I comfortable asking others what they want and don't want? That's the inclusive piece, right? That's the relational, connecting piece. Both are incredibly important to our functioning. And I think I'll just leave it at that for tonight. I like to start out paying attention to what is, which is very hard for me to do because I always want to get caught up with what I should be, what the world should be, all the stuff we're talking about here, right? For me to be okay. It helps me a lot to slow down, to reduce my anxiety, because Alan's right. When I'm governed by my need to people please and desperate fear of disapproval, I am constantly anxiety filled. And I know many other people that struggle with people pleasing a lot have shared that with me as well. Mm-hmm. So then I just pay attention to the anxiety and being able to, not just tolerate it and be aware of it, but to say, what could I get in touch with within myself that could help me feel able to comfort myself, able to soothe myself, able to stand on my own feet a little bit more right now, or just acknowledge the anxiety if I feel safe enough to do so. So I'll let it go at that. Thank you, Al, for that those comments tonight.
Yeah, thank you both. That's I appreciate that very much. Al, do you want to say anything about with responding to Roger?
Oh no, it's a very nice addition. Sweetening the pot, sweeten.
Well, I'll try to be brief. One of the things my wife tells me, Dee Dee says that whenever I'm talking to people, I often say 2 things, and then I just start talking, and there's not, I don't even number them. It's like I just start by saying I'm going to, just kind of, get people's expectations up. But there is 2 things here. One thing is I've realized this whole Thursday group it continues to be such a wonderful experience for me. And I say that to you, Alan, but definitely that's as much to you, Roger, in terms of what I've learned and gained from you. And it sounds corny, but it really is for the whole community, the whole group, because I've always found myself not having problems involving myself in. I love group work, being a part of a group while I'm being a leader of a group. But I've never had an experience quite this deeply where I am both a full-fledged participant in the process and a partial with partial responsibility and leadership. And it's like it's wonderful. And one of the things that I've learned is how to using that phrase that I've learned from you, Alan, looking at it through these lenses. It's like, let's look through this lens. It's like looking at the 12 steps through the emotional sobriety lens, is just was transformative for me. It changed sometimes about the way I think, but a lot of times it just increased my awareness about how I've been thinking this way all along, in some ways. But now that we're started with the lens of differentiation, and I've gone back and reviewed some Mary Bowen stuff and tried to get back and remember what I learned in social work school and stuff. Today, what I'm doing, Alan, is I'm offering myself as a ready visual aid for your instruction during this process, because one of the things, and it was already becoming clear to me, but as you talked tonight, it became very clear. I come from, you could describe my whole story as coming from from two completely non-differentiated parents, having the intelligence to put a framework of language around that seemed like the very opposite of that, but there was no differentiation, and being the most, if there was a contest of who could be the most undifferentiated, by the time I was out of high school and into college, I would have won that, if it pleased everyone. But I mean, I can't find all the exact words for it, but it's like, I realize my recovery really is about that. And it's like, I grew up in a family where, the first time I was ever in therapy, and somebody asked me to draw a picture to represent my family, I drew a picture of a solar system, basically, in which my mother was at the center and everybody else in the family were planets revolving around. I had no idea what this fucking meant at the time. I just drew it. It's like, and that has been there to aid me and to haunt me every step of the way. And it's like everything in my family growing up in that invisible policy manual was about a system that had nothing to do with checking out anything with myself. And then I'll just give the preview and say, and therefore when I grew up and went out into the world and decided to, one of the things that happened with that is, once you got away from that family, this is the truth of siblings of mine, you didn't go back. Because there was no such thing as having it both ways. It was like you could go back. You might be able to send your body back to physically visit for an obligatory holiday, but it's like you never went back, because I always say the visual of on that is if this is that family structure, you get that close in and it's got you. So it's like when you do that, it's like I'm not going to do it. But guess what? This is my pursuit of relationship for the first many years of my life. I want something. I know how to please people, so I know how to be what they need me to be. So they're going to find me attractive. They're going to, because I can be that. But the moment, and I was so confused by this, the moment I was getting supposedly what I wanted, I had to go. And it's like, I mean, sometimes quite literally, just if I'd be in a relationship and things seem to be going very well, it's like I would get up in that moment and walk away and just leave. I can think of two examples in which I just left a woman's apartment and just never came back, and we were just dating. It's like it was, and I had no idea why I would do that. But of course, I had no idea how to be in a relationship and have a self and be a part of something else. So, but anyway, having said all that, Alan, you're welcome to point to me, use me as role in role plays, whatever along the way, because I am a great example of the undifferentiated man.
Yeah.
I appreciate, as always.
It's always important to say this stuff, because I want to make clear, I said it last week, we are victims of victims. There's no bad people here. We're not talking about bad people. We're talking about the human experience and what happens. And our parents could only pass on what they got, which was never enough. And that's how we ended up. Virginia Satir had a great exercise she did when I went to her workshop. She would say, "Everybody close your eyes." She goes, "I just want you to imagine how you got to where you are today." She goes, now for a minute, just imagine that the umbilical cords were never cut, and start to trace your life. How far do you go back? Well, a long, long time. She goes, that's how you are arrived at where you're at. All these generations before you passed on what they were learning or what they had, and you have the sum total of that today. And she said, it's not enough. Trust me. Now it's your job. You got the seed of evolution. You got to, it's like a football. You get to advance it for the next 5 yards or whatever we can possibly do within our capability. You know, I love the image of it. But look, somebody just informed me that Herb is with us tonight. And I'd like to invite Herb in as usual to be part of the discussion tonight. Herb, are you okay with joining us and saying a few words in terms of?
As unused to public speaking as I am.
Yes, I mean, my goodness.
Thank you so much for inviting me to play. And I was reminded of two things at the beginning when you started talking about differentiation, and I came from the prior workshop also. I was thinking of tradition one. You know, it's really about that.
Isn't it?
Because personal recovery is really important, but the common welfare actually is the priority. So it's an attempt to exactly do what you're talking about in terms of the recovery of the individual, but the unity of the community. Yes. So I just thought I'd put that out. But this last comment that y'all made and reminded me, and I'm not sure that this is science, but I've heard that it is, and that is the offspring of people who were in the camp it's been analyzed that their DNA has the traces from the DNA of the Holocaust survivor.
That's right.
So when you said the generations, that's what tripped that trigger. I mean, if that's really true, and I think it is, I've heard it from several sources, then in fact, the genetic transfer of experience is like at that level of cellular embedment. And we have just an awful lot of work to do to, in fact, become conscious, especially if you have a distorted personality like I had from whatever the confluences of circumstances were. I was never concerned, I thought, about other people. And yet, of course, it was my obsession. And I never concerned about fitting in until I began to become conscious, my own personal sense of consciousness, and then organically beginning to be aware that there's a community that, quote, I should be concerned about, and then eventually evolving in this whole emotional sobriety thing to where it was like, no, I am connected and I am concerned about a contribution. That's all. Yeah.
Well, let me just build on that 1 minute. So, I mean, listen to this, because this goes to right what you're talking about, how what's going on in the group does impact the individual, right? You're talking about the transmission of the trauma, right? From these people that were Holocausts victims in terms of the survivors. So they look at ant colonies. They were studying ant colonies to look at this whole function, because they function very much as a group, right? So let's say an ant colony was attacked and they lost a bunch of different soldiers that would defend the colony. Now, I don't know how this happens, but from that point on, let's say there's a 40% decrease in soldiers in that colony. The birth rate of soldiers from the queens is an inordinate amount of soldiers. The need of I get goosebumps. The need of the community gets communicated somehow. It manifests itself genetically through what type of ant is going to be born. Isn't that, I mean, I find that.
No, I just read an article in our local newspaper. I live in Palos Verdes about coyotes. And it indicated that the science has shown that the amount of food available, the natural food, determines how many offspring the coyote has. Same kind of concept.
We're always in interplay. There's always
Yeah,
an interaction. And in the meeting before this, I was just talking about how freedom involves a social responsibility. And I really love how we looked at the 12 steps through a lens of differentiation. You're starting to look at the traditions through that lens of differentiation and seeing the same thing.
Right.
Bill didn't realize it, but he was promoting a high level of a differentiation of consciousness.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps, that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved, the forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. The first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. We're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.